Let's talk about it. We're at the Birdville Cemetery in modern-day Haltom City, Texas, and we have found the place in the Birdville Cemetery where the Walkers, the family, are buried. And there's a bunch of them here. And we can't find A.G. Walker, or Hiram Walker for that matter. Our great uncle is A.G. Walker. And our great grandfather, his brother, is or was Hiram Walker. And they both came out here to Texas from Kentucky in the 1840s. They walked the entire distance driving a small herd of oxen. And they arrived in Texas in December 1845. About 1 month, I believe, before Texas was admitted to the Union. I'm not too sure about that figure, but at any rate, they're buried here. And these are all Walker graves here. And we've looked for Hiram, who I understand is buried here, and A.G., Albert Gallatin. Looked for his grave. And we found this one, which appears to be the oldest one among all these, with a birth and a death date on. The problem is that this 4 people are buried here under this one tombstone, and 2 sides of this are worn down. You can't see the writing, not well enough to read, but there is a William A. Walker, born 1802, died 1858, buried here under this tombstone. And back over here, there's another Walker. This is pretty hard to make out, and we don't know which is which is Hiram, our great grandfather, and which is and here's a Margaret Walker. This could, born 1810, died 1898. This could be a great grandmother for all I know. I'd have to look at my notes to be sure. But all these other graves immediately surrounding are Walkers. These are the people that were born later, and after the Walkers began to proliferate. And so Ray and I are of the Walker family. And that's what brings us out here today, because we were curious to see the graves of our ancestors, the Walkers. Hiram Walker, our great grandfather, lived a very quiet, private, low-key, out-of-the-way lifestyle. He was not nearly as flamboyant and as exciting as his brother, Albert Gallatin Walker, named after one Albert Gallatin, who was a famed politician in the early days of the nation. The 2 brothers came out here in the 1840s and arrived, as I say, in 1845 in the area of what's present-day Fort Worth. At that time, the courthouse was Birdville, Texas, the site of what now is known as Haltom City, a section of Fort Worth. And here in Birdville, where A.G. is buried, is where he grew up and came to fame. And he was a politician. He was, as I understand, fiercely against.
Okay, Mack is telling us that A.J. Walker was a surveyor. He actually surveyed a good part of Dallas and Fort Worth, which was Peter's colony, a large part of Dallas-Fort Worth that extended from the Red River all the way down to south of Fort Worth. And he did that work with a small crew. If you can imagine doing that with on horseback all through this area. Besides the dangers of simply the weather and all the work you had to do in Texas, they had the animals and insects and Indians and other dangers that surveyors might experience.
Well, he had a bitter enemy in the person of one John Courtenay, who was a rival newspaper publisher. They both published weekly newspapers here in modern-day Haltom City, what then was Birdville. Well, he had a bitter enemy in the person of one John Courtenay, who was a rival newspaper publisher. They both published weekly newspapers here in modern-day Haltom City, what then was Birdville. Here we are in another part of the Walker family plot here in the Birdville Cemetery. And the story is that our great-great-granduncle, A.G. Walker, Albert Gallatin Walker, was not only the first surveyor of this entire part of what then was called the Peters Colony, now we know it as North Texas. He was a newspaper publisher, and he was writing editorials condemning the idea to move the courthouse to Fort Worth, which was a new upstart community not too far away. And he had a bitter enemy in one John or Tom Courtenay, who ran the rival newspaper, and who was not only Walker's opposite in terms of the matter of moving the courthouse or the county seat. They were also on opposite sides regarding the secession from the Union. A.G. Walker was a Union man. Courtenay was a Confederate, and they were both at odds over two main topics of the day. And it all came to a head one day when Courtenay walked into our great-great-uncle's newspaper office and started firing a gun. And the one who survived the gunfight was our ancestor, A.G. Walker. And he delivered one killing shot to Courtenay, who died, and he survived unscathed. But then secession did happen, and for that matter, the move of the courthouse to Fort Worth did happen. And Walker, though bitterly opposed to both, lived with the fact that was the way it was. And he stayed in public office. After the Civil War, he was because he had been a Union man all along, he was put back into county office. I forget the exact position he held at county commissioners or something court. At any rate, he was part of the Reconstruction government, and lived for a number of years, and always in this area. And less is known about our great-great-grandfather, Hiram, because he was a very quiet man, stayed off, not involved at all in politics of any kind, not involved in the public eye, and not much is known about him except that he settled rather with his family in what today is northern Johnson County. Deer Creek was what the nearest town of any size was called, or what the community was called. Today, that's known as Crowley, Texas. And as I say, he lived a very under-the-radar, quiet life, and it's hard to find out any information about him. Whereas you can't pick up a history book about Fort Worth or Tarrant County without finding A.G. Walker all over the place. He got elected to the state Congress and served as a state senator for some years down in Austin, and was very much in the public eye. He is buried somewhere out here, but we can't find his grave. We think that that was it over there, but it's such an old grave that two sides of it have the writing on it has gradually faded away. But that's an old grave. And one thing we know for sure, all these walkers that we're surrounded by here are relatives of ours. So that's the Walker story in a nutshell.